Your objective for lesson 18 is I will construct rectangles from a given number of unit squares and determine the perimeters. So we're going to be drawing different rectangles and finding the perimeter of these rectangles. And a lot of the rectangles that we're going to be working with today all have the same area. But just because a rectangle and another rectangle have the same area does not mean that they're going to have the same perimeter. So this lesson, we're actually going to move right into the problem set, and I know that that makes you excited, that there's no concept development. So go ahead and take out your problem set and have that ready so we can start on the problem set together. And actually, you are going to have the template that's going to go with this, which is like the unit squares that we did when we were working with area. So you do need to have that template because you're going to be shading in some rectangles while we're doing the problem set. So you actually need both of those papers out. If you want to take out that template that has all the squares in it, you can take that out of your binder and kind of set that beside you so you can work on your problem set in your binder. So get that ready, and if you need to push pause, do that now. Okay, so for number 1 on the problem set, it says use unit squares to build as many rectangles as you can with an area of 24 square units. Shade in squares on your grid paper to represent each rectangle that you made with an area of 24 square units. Part A says estimate and draw and label the side lengths of each rectangle you built in problem 1, then find the perimeter of each rectangle. One rectangle is done for you. So this first one you do not have to shade in on your grid paper. It's already done for you, but if you were to shade it, you would just shade 24 squares in a row. And we know that this rectangle would have an area of 24 because one side length is 1 and the other side length is 24, and whenever we do 24 times 1, we get 24. So if I were to find the perimeter of this shape, we know that perimeter is add up all of the sides. So if this side length was 24, then this side length would also be 24. And if this side length was 1, then this other side length would also be 1. So that's the same thing as saying 24 plus 1 and 24 plus 1, which would give us 50 units. So the perimeter of this long rectangle is actually 50 units. So this actually has a pretty large perimeter. So on your grid paper, you need to be shading in a rectangle that has an area of 24. And if you don't remember, the way that we find the rectangle is to multiply the side lengths. So you need to be thinking right now of what numbers can I multiply together that will give me 24. So you may want to make a list of those. 24 and 1 do not need to be in your numbers because we already did that one. So actually, before you start shading, I want you on like this space of your problem set, we're going to make a list of all the numbers that we can multiply together that would give us 24. So the first thing is 4 times 6. You're not going to put 6 times 4 because 4 times 6 and 6 times 4 are going to be the same thing. It would be the same rectangle. Even if we drew it a different way, instead of having 4 rows of 6, if we had 6 rows of 4, it would still give us the same perimeter. Another way is 12 times 2. We know that that gives us 24, and we know that 3 times 8 gives us 24. So those are the ones that you're going to be working with. So you're going to draw 3 different rectangles on your grid paper and shade those in. And we're going to have to use our grid paper for another problem, so don't have these rectangles really spread out, kind of put them closer together so we can draw other rectangles on your grid paper. But once you've drawn the rectangles and shaded them in on your grid paper for 4 times 6 and 12 times 2 and 3 times 8, then I want you to push play so we can move on with this first problem on the problem set. Okay, so what we have to do here is we kind of have to draw an area model for what you shaded in on the grid paper. So we're going to draw a rectangle. Whoops, that's not a rectangle, it's a square. We're going to draw a rectangle for the 4 times 6. And probably looks something about like that. The 12 times 2, if you did 12 times 2, then it's going to be like a longer rectangle because it had 12 rows. And then if you did 3 times 8, going to be something about like that. So it said to draw and label the side lengths. So we have to label the side lengths. I know that this side length right here would be, let me make this smaller. That side length right there would be 6 units. So you need to put that on your paper. And then the other side length would be 4 units. And then for this other one side length is going to be 12 units. And then the other side length we know is going to be 2 units. And then the last one we had side lengths of 3 and 8. So this side length would be 3 units. And then the longer side length would be 8 units. So now we have them labeled. And those are the ones that we use to have an area of 24 square units. So then it says find the perimeter of each rectangle. So you can either go back to your grid paper and you can count all of those different sides around each rectangle, or we can look at this one right here, and we know that with rectangles, opposite sides are equal length. So if one side is 6, the opposite side is going to be 6, and if one side is 4, then the opposite side is going to be 4. So right here we can just do our work on our paper and say 4 plus 6 plus 4 plus 6, and that's going to give us what our perimeter is for this shape right here. And we know, or you should know, that 4 plus 6 makes a 10. So this is really saying I have 10 plus 10, so that's going to give me 20. So I'm kind of going to write right in the middle of this. We're going to say, well, if I can get it right in the middle, we're going to say that the perimeter equals 20 units. Remember that with perimeter we do not have to put square units. And now we're going to do the same thing for this one over here, the 12 and the 2. So I could say 12 plus 2 plus 12 plus 2, and that is going to be equal to my perimeter. I know that 12 plus 12 equals 24. And then if I add the 2 and the 2 to the 24, that's like saying 24 plus 4. And 24 plus 4 would give me 28. So we're going to say that the perimeter is equal to 28 units. Okay, now we're going to move on to this next one. We're going to say 3 plus 8 plus 3 plus 8 is equal to what our perimeter is. I know that 8 plus 8 is 16. I know that 3 plus 3 is 6. So whenever you have 16 plus 6, you're going to get that it's 23. So I know that the perimeter of this rectangle is going to be 23 units.
We're done.
Okay, so this next question says the areas of the rectangles in part A are all the same. But it says, what do you notice about the perimeters? And this is one thing I wanted to go over with you about this lesson is, even though rectangles could have the same area, their perimeters could be completely different. One thing I wanted you to notice though is the longer the rectangle, then the larger the perimeter is going to be. Because if you notice the very first rectangle that they did for you, it was super duper long. It just had 1 unit on one side and then 24 units on the other side. So that perimeter was really long. The next longest one is going to be this 28 units, and it was a longer rectangle than the other two. And then the other one after that was the 8 by 3, and it was longer than this one that was 6 by 4. So the longer the rectangle, then the more or the greater the perimeter is. So that's what we're going to put right here on this one. The longer the rectangle, the greater the perimeter is. And that's just one thing that you're going to have to remember, because some rectangles will have the same area, but their perimeters are going to be completely different. Okay, now we're moving on to number 2. We're going to have to use your grid paper again. It says use unit square tiles to build as many rectangles as you can with an area of 16 square units. Estimate to draw each rectangle below and then label the side lengths. So actually I'm going to leave this up to you. If you want to use your grid paper, you can to shade it in so you can see what these rectangles look like. Or we can just draw what they look like and label the side lengths. But before we do any drawing, we're going to do like what we did before, and we're going to make a list of the factors that we can multiply together that would equal 16. So the first one that we should know and that we're definitely going to be putting down is 16 times 1. And so I want you to go ahead and put the rest of the factors that you can multiply together that would equal 16 right there on your problem set, and push play whenever you're ready to check that. Okay, so you should have had the 16 times 1, and then 2 times 8, and then 4 times 4. So the first one that we're going to draw is the 16 times 1. So that would be like the other one that was 24 and 1. So this one's going to be really long, and then it's going to be really short on one side. And when we label the side lengths, we're going to have 16 units. And we're going to have, over here on the other side, 1 unit. And then we're going to draw the 2 times 8, which would have 2 rows with 8 in each row. So this one's going to be kind of long too, just not as long, and it's going to be a little bit wider. And then we're going to label that side length. This one would be 2 units, and then the other side length would be 8 units. And then the last one is actually going to have all sides that are the same length, because I know that it's going to have 4 rows and then 4 in each row, and that would make all the sides the same length. So this one's not going to look exactly like a rectangle. It's going to more look like a square, because we're going to have 4 and 4. So this side would be 4 units, and then the other side would also be 4 units. So now we have to work to find the perimeter of each one of these rectangles that have an area of 16 square units, because that's what it says. It says find the perimeters of the rectangles you built. So we know that to find the perimeter, we have to add up all of the side lengths. So I'm kind of going to put it like right here in the middle. I'm going to say 16 plus 1 plus 16 plus 1, and it's going to equal what my perimeter is. So I'm going to do a little bit different than we did on the first page, because we don't have a lot of room. So the perimeter of this one is, we know that 16 plus 16 is going to be 32. And then when you add that 1 and that 1 to 32, we can say that we have 34. So our perimeter for this one is going to be 34. And I do need to put units beside that, so I'm going to fix that. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing for the other one. We're going to say 2 plus 8 plus 2 plus 8, and this equals a perimeter of 8 plus 8 is 16, and then when you have 2 plus 2, that's 4. So whenever you have 16 plus 4, that gives you 20 units. And then this last one, we're just going to say 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4, and we know that this is the same thing as 4 times 4, and so that perimeter is going to be 16 units. So this one right here actually has the same area and the same perimeter, and that will happen sometimes. Sometimes you will have the same area and the same perimeter. It really just depends on the side lengths of the rectangle that you're working with. So now we're done with all of those rectangles that have an area of 16 and have different perimeters. And then B says, what is the perimeter of the square, which is the only one up here that we have, a square. So the perimeter of the square is 16 units. And then it says, explain how you found your answer. I found my answer by adding 4 times. And then in parentheses, I'm going to put, which is 4 times 4. Now we're ready to move on to number 3 on this page. It says, Doug uses square unit tiles to build rectangles with an area of 15 square units. He draws the rectangles as shown below, but forgets to label the side lengths. Doug says that rectangle A has a greater perimeter than rectangle B. Do you agree? Why or why not? Well, the first thing that we need to do is label the side lengths. And I know you're going to say, well, we don't know what the side lengths are, but based on the other rectangles that we've drawn for this, it won't be hard to find out. The first thing that we need to do, though, is we need to, over here on the side, write down the factors that we can multiply together that will equal 15. And we know for sure that one of them is going to be 15 times 1. You can't count by 2's and say 15. You can count by 3's and say 15, because we know that 3 times 5 is 15, and then we're not going to go on any further. These are the only 2 rectangles that you can draw that are going to have an area of 15 square units. So We know that this rectangle A has a side length of 15 units right here, and then this side length is going to be 1 unit. And then we know that this other one would be the 3 times 5. This side right here is longer than this side, so we're going to say that this shorter side is the one that's 3 units, and that this longer side is 5 units. So now we have to figure out if what he said is actually true or not, because he said that rectangle A has a greater perimeter than rectangle B. And if you remember what I told you from the front page, that the longer the rectangle is, then the greater the perimeter is going to be. So we do know that rectangle A is going to have a longer perimeter, or a larger perimeter, or a greater perimeter than rectangle B. So we do need to say, yes, I agree, but now we have to get to the because part. And that's not where we're going to say that the rectangle is longer, so it has a greater perimeter. We're actually going to use our evidence and really explain why, and that is us going to be finding out the perimeter of rectangle A and finding out the perimeter of rectangle B to be able to explain our answer. So over here on the side somewhere, I want you to find the rectangle, or the perimeter of rectangle A, and then I want you to find the perimeter of rectangle B so we can compare them to see which one has a greater perimeter. So I want you to push pause and find the perimeter of rectangle A, and then find the perimeter of rectangle B, and whenever you're ready to figure out if your answer is correct, you can push play. So the perimeter of rectangle A was 32 units, and the perimeter of rectangle B was 16 units. So now we can go and finish our explanation. We can say, yes, I agree, because the perimeter of rectangle A is 32 units, and the perimeter of rectangle B is 16 units, and 32 is more than 16. So now we have answered this last question for number 3, and you are ready to move on to the exit ticket. Once you have completed the exit ticket, I would like for you to bring that to me so we can check it.